Good afternoon. Welcome to our regularly scheduled enterprise meeting. It's January 9th, 2020. I'm Lene Palmisano, and I chair this committee. With me on the dais are council members Goodman, Cano, and Fletcher. We're a quorum of this committee and authorized to do our committee's business. Colleagues, we have 7 consent items on the agenda today. I'll read those and see if anybody has any questions or need to pull any of them off. And then we have 2 discussion items. Item number 1 is an RFP for occupational health services. Item number 2 are contracts with DRI, which we've used in the past, and SKS Consulting for management assessment and those kinds of services that we have used within our city enterprise. Item number 3 is a contract amendment for license, maintenance, and support of Elms. Item number 4 is a contract amendment for Project Docs upgrade. That's also something that goes with Elms. Item number 5 is a contract amendment with Deloitte for pension benefit consulting services. Item number 6 is an extension, a short extension for the MTN Access Television contract. As we continue, and you may know, we've been having a conversation about what our communication needs are here and into the future for quite some time, but that work's going to take a little bit longer. Item number 6 is a bid for telecommunications equipment. That's throughout our city enterprise, and that is a $1.5 million contract for 2 years. Does anybody have any questions or want to take anything off the consent agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. We've been joined by Councilmember Warsami, and we're going to get to our first discussion item, which is different in limbs right now than it says on our revised spreadsheet. It is a reduced contract that would be for an amount not to exceed $500,000, not $1 million. With us today to discuss some of the progress that's taken place on how we do different types of investigations is Director Patience Ferguson. Welcome. Oh, and Mr. Chuck Bernardi.
Chair Palmisano and members of the Enterprise Committee, I wanted to inform you of some work that we've been doing over the course of the year to really take a deeper dive into human resources, anti-discrimination, harassment, and retaliation process, are also known as AD&H&R. So in compliance with federal, state, and local laws, we do have a policy regarding anti-discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. Cultural norms around our acceptable workplace behaviors have really taken a dramatic increase in light of the Me Too movement as well as the Black Lives Matters. And as our organization and our workforce has become increasingly more diverse, we really want to we wanted to take a step back to see what we were doing and also see what are some areas we really felt strongly as an organization we needed to improve. So that was the context of why we did it. I'd also like to add that we also had some retirements that are going on in our department, and we thought it would be a really nice transition to take that opportunity to look at what we were doing as a department and also as an enterprise. As a result of that, in 2019, the Human Resources Department reviewed our existing program and looked at what our performance indicators were, and we found that many of our investigations did not meet the threshold that we wanted them to meet. We also noticed that our volume had increased slightly over the course of the year. We also learned that in some cases, as we did a deeper dive, some of the behaviors, we found that some of our employees still were not reporting the things that they should be reporting on. We also went and talked with different people. We hired an outside firm to look at having conversations with our human resource generalists and other key stakeholders. And what we found is that there was a perception that our process wasn't transparent, that people still did not quite understand what the investigation process was, and that our employees, whether that was a manager or employees who were directly impacted by the investigations, really had some unrealistic expectations regarding how long those investigations would take. And there were people who were, quite frankly, fearful about having our team to come in and do the investigations. And so part of the message that we wanted to send is that we really want our employees to understand not only why this is important, but that we're there to support them. And that was some really powerful outcomes that has come as a result of us doing this work and engaging with our employee base and our labor leaders and also our managers. So as a result of that, we have committed to having, with our existing resources, more administrative support. We have strengthened our and standardized our investigation documentation, and we've made a very deep and thoughtful and intentional commitment around communication and training with the goals of raising awareness with all of our employees, including our managers, of why they should report potential investigations, ensure that our leaders and managers understand the importance of this work, and also help our employees understand the process a little bit more, and then to also use this as the opportunity to reinforce and set expectations. So the next slide talks about what our plans are for 2020, and they fall in two very distinct areas. One is around the increased training, not only for our employees, but also for our supervisors, because they are the agents of the enterprise. And the more that we can help equip them to begin to understand how important this is, and also for them to be as equally committed to reporting potential violations, the more that will just help everyone. So we have rebranded our program and calling it Respect Minneapolis. We have been working very diligently with communications, and we'll be rolling out information on City Talk. We also are in the process of refreshing our current AD and HR training. We have we will be talking more with our leaders around this work, and we're also rolling out a specific learning program for supervisors. I have, if you would, there's a piece that just gives an example of around transparency that I've given all of you. This is an example of some of the communication pieces that we are going to be rolling out that really gets at helping everyone understand what our investigation process is. But we also have relooked at things such as all of the letters that we give to participants. We have fact sheets that we have developed in collaboration with communications so that people, if you have, are you the person who has reported it, or you're a person that's involved in it, we have very specific fact sheets that we're giving. We also have created a frequently asked question sheet that we will be giving to people who are our employees and our managers. And lastly, we'll also have created a survey every year so that we can always get feedback in terms of the process. We've also created some talking points for people who may be interested in learning more about our investigations process. And so our plan is to roll these process improvements out this year. We've already worked with our communications. We have a communications plan around that. Our learning and development team is working right now to redesign the training so that everyone understands that it is really important to understand what our process is with the ultimate goal of creating a much more stronger, respectful, and inclusive workplace. I'm now available to stand for questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from my colleagues? I have one.
Yes.
You mentioned on a previous slide that people perhaps have unrealistic expectations as to how long an investigation would take to be thorough in doing it. But do you think it's realistic that after somebody who feels discriminated against and is willing to put themselves out there and report it, that it should take longer than 90 days?
That's why Council Chair Palmisano, what sometimes happens, and members of the committee, it depends on the nature of the investigation. So in some cases, it may take longer because as a person is doing an investigation, you may find out more information and then you have to go back through your investigation plan and make changes. One of the reasons why we are committing more resources to the administrative support is because our investigators were not only doing the investigations, they'd also have to do the administrative support. And so what we're hoping that happens as a result of this, by us reallocating some of our existing resources, that will hopefully help us to increase the amount of time that is actually being spent on the investigations themselves, as opposed to spending time on administrative work. And what we also have put in this process is an evaluation process that is much more rigorous, that really helps us figure out what those pain points are, and hopefully all of the things that we're doing will help us to decrease the amount of time that they're spending on administrative and increase the efficiency of the process itself.
Thank you. I appreciate your working on this for what seems like a portion of last year. And I'm curious if there's a backlog at this point that we need to clear out before this process that you've created can run smoothly, or what your thoughts are in terms of helping things to go smoother here forward.
I will defer to Steve Kennedy to respond to that.
Sure. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Patience. I'm Steve Kennedy. I'm currently the lead investigator in the HR investigative unit. We are actively reducing our case log now. We have significantly reduced it already and are taking great pains to reduce it further. My expectation is that by the time we roll out the new program, which we're hoping for mid-March, that we will be caught up and have nothing older than 90 days at that point in time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I don't see any further questions from members of committee, so I'd like to move approval of this item as set forth in the revised RCA, which has been distributed to all committee members, and that's to authorize 2 contracts for a not-to-exceed amount of $250,000 for these neutral workplace investigations. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That item carries. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your work. Last but not least, we have our regular city coordinator update, and with us we have interim coordinator Mark Ruff. Welcome.
Chair Palmisano, members of the committee, and Mark Ruff, the city CFO and interim city coordinator. We thought that we use a bit of the time this afternoon of the committee just to highlight the enterprise's response to the Drake fire. I think, number one, I'm very proud of the response that started with our fire department quickly on Christmas Day when that fire broke out in approximately 3 a.m. Quickly mobilized then our emergency operations team, who brought in the Red Cross, and a search was sought and found for the first few days for a shelter to be operated by the Red Cross at Bethlehem Baptist in the east part of downtown. They had more than 100 people at that shelter. As you are aware, a few days after that, the families that had been living at the Drake Hotel, and we do have the estimate of over 250 people who were at the hotel, families who were there, many of whom were already receiving support from the county, were moved to a long extended stay hotel in Bloomington, and then additional family units and individuals moved over to First Covenant Church, where the shelter has been operated since then. Currently at First Covenant, the numbers are in the high 40s to high 50s on a daily basis as to who is actually staying overnight at the shelter. People come in and out. Many people are still working. Many of the people who were at the Drake Hotel, which is a board and lodging facility, not a rental housing facility, had jobs, were paying in the neighborhood of $550 to $650 per month for a single room. Some families were paying as much as $900 for those units. Some of the families that originally were at the shelter were then moved into the county system, and the county is working with those families. I would say that the support the enterprise has been giving the Red Cross includes security support. The health department has been very active in monitoring the health of residents, overseeing food distribution, and bringing in other culturally appropriate support as needed and requested by the Red Cross. The There have been other additional support. Many of you have been involved with that in terms of just transportation needs. There has been counseling and work in terms of then what are the longer term solutions for people for housing. The other ways that we as a city are involved is obviously the structure itself that resides in Councilmember Goodman's ward, and she's tracking very carefully in terms of the demolition of that facility. It is privately owned, and the future of that is going to be determined like any other land use future. But there is a press conference later this afternoon where we will be giving an additional update. I would say that generally, in addition to the enterprise efforts that I've enumerated, and we always forget about the little things that happen, like Public Works has been engaged to make sure there's adequate parking around First Covenant because there's so many more people there. I mean, it's just all of those ways that we as a city engage that are not highly visible but are critical to the way that community comes together to support individuals who are in crisis. And then what do we do as we move from crisis to long-term solutions for a population that didn't have many resources to start with. Really feel very good about in terms of the county and the role that we've had with them. Certainly the announcement yesterday from the Minneapolis Foundation engaging Pillsbury United, which will go beyond the life of the shelter to help support individuals and families is critical. And this is on the heels of another tragic fire in Councilmember Warsami's ward, and just also wanted to say that the fire department doesn't just come in and leave, that they continue to be involved in these through investigations and other support. So I'm happy to answer questions, but just want to give you an update that this is, for some of us, taking still substantial hours per day, and we are having daily phone calls and really very positive interactions. And Gia from the mayor's office has been very heavily involved as well.
Thank you so much. We are so grateful for you and so many of our department heads to be really hands-on through all of this. Comments from my colleagues? I think I speak for everybody to express my thanks to you, Coordinator, for all of your efforts. We hadn't had an update at a council meeting yet, so that's why we felt this was appropriate to put it on the enterprise agenda today. So. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just one last thing is the last time we engaged the Red Cross for a shelter was the North Minneapolis tornado in 2011. So this is, again, I think, worthwhile for those of us who weren't here in 2011 to understand just how that relationship works with Red Cross, how we engage and when we engage in shelter needs. And I think that's a worthwhile conversation for a future council meeting as well, because how we adapt and react to disasters. Each disaster is very different, but times are different than they were in 2011 as well. And so expectations of the city and the county are different as well. And so I think that's a healthy discussion for the council at some time in the near future.
Super. Do you foresee kind of an after action, after project type of roll-up document that could be useful for the future, or what form do you suggest that takes?
Yeah, Chair Palmisano, I think clearly emergency management will be involved in an after-action report, as well as the health department. I think we will talk with the health department as to what's the appropriate committee, but the signatories actually, and I looked at this document recently, of our agreement with the Red Cross are the health commissioner, the emergency operations director, and the fire chief. So all three of them are involved. So that's part of the appropriateness of talking about this at Enterprise, is that it is a mutual response that goes on in these disasters.
Thank you. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I just want to commend you on the incredible work that you have done. I know many of you were in or out of town over the entire holidays, but when I heard about this at about 4:30 in the morning, and I'm Jewish, so it's not really, Christmas isn't a big deal to me. Please know that all of our staff, including all the first responder firefighters, were called in over Christmas Eve. There has been incredible work done by the city coordinator himself in the middle of a kind of quiet period of time, as well as by all of the first responders on Barrett Lane's team, on Chief Friedel's team, and in the health department. So I first want to commend you and thank you for all the things you've done. You've done a just terrific job, and I don't know that this is our job but it is our job to coordinate with everybody. I'll note that the thing we can do the best is the piece that we probably don't have the most direct connection to, which is trying to work on the housing angle of it. So I also just want to note Katie Topinka and Andrea Brennan's work over the holidays to try to collect resources for housing, as well as Steve Poor's work. I understand Mr. Poor's been down there every day, including, as many people have asked me about, attempting to live trap a cat that was lost in the process, which it's terrible we can't find the cat. I completely agree. And perhaps animal control has a few cats they could choose from, and we could move that in that direction if we need to. Just ultimately, I want to thank those of you on the committee who reached out to me, especially Councilmember Cano, who reached out to me on Christmas Day, on her Christmas Day when she was with her family, to see how I was doing, and to Councilmember Fletcher, who's been really actively involved, even though this hasn't been in his ward. He was very present as well. So I think the city's response has been really good and supportive, and I know Councilmember Warsame would probably say a very similar thing as to the fire in his ward. These after-incident reports can talk about what we can do better, and we can always have continuous improvement. But our staff have really rose above and beyond. And under the leadership of Mr. Ruff, this has not been a giant strain on everybody, including the victims and survivors of the fire.
Well said. Thank you, Mr. Ruff. All those in favor of receiving and filing the coordinator's monthly report on City Department's response to the Drake Hotel, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. With that, our business on this agenda is complete. Thank you.